Folks are coming into the room. We'll give it a minute or two. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We are just going to wait. I still see people coming into the webinar. All right. The number seems to have steadied off, so without further ado. So my name is Brian Pellrine. Thanks for joining us tonight to hear about a proposal from Georgetown Company regarding the Bank of America, the former Bank of America building at 1565 North Clybourn. I will go ahead and turn it over pretty quickly here to Alderman Hopkins to give some introductory remarks, and then he will have the development team give a presentation, and then we will do some question and answer. So Alderman Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Appreciate everyone's interest in this project. It has generated a significant amount of interest in the last couple of weeks. There's been a little bit of media attention for it, and that always gets people interested in a proposal like this. So we're here tonight to look at some of the details that haven't been reported in the media coverage. This is a major proposal, and we have to look at it carefully. This is the first community meeting. It may not be the last, depending on how many questions are raised tonight and the sufficiency of the answers that are provided. I do reserve the right to have additional community meetings if that's indicated going forward. Having said that, we do have a sufficient amount of expertise here tonight that should be able to answer all the questions that come up. We have representatives of the developer, we have representatives of the architect, we have representatives of the legal firm that is representing the development team. So between them, we should be able to get answers to any questions that are provided. We will use the chat feature for questions during the course of the presentation tonight. And if time allows, we will open it up at the end to an open forum if people have additional questions that require more elaboration. I do want to welcome members of Sono, who I know have expressed a lot of interest because this project is right in their grill. But we also have representatives here of Ranch Triangle and from the Howe Orchard Burling community that have expressed an interest in it, even though the project's a little bit farther away from their neighborhood. All are welcome, and your input is essential to this process. That's what it's here for. If the developer can make a case to the community that this project is in fact an enhancement and a benefit to the community, that's the path for approval for them, and they know it. So that's your role tonight, is to look at this through a critical lens and provide input and comments that can hopefully improve the project and earn your support. So with that, I will turn it over to a representative of the development team, Paul Shadle. Paul, take it from here.
Thank you, Alderman. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Shadle. I'm with the law firm of DLA Piper, and with my partner, Mariah DeGrino, we're representing the developer and applicant. And with us from the developer is Paul Apollonio. And also here are Angela Spadoni, Tom Kerwin, and Daniela Sesma from BKL Architecture, and Matt Strange with Confluence, the landscape architects. The application that we hope to file this month would request approval of an amendment to the existing plan development zoning for this transit-served location to allow a 37-story building that would include 396 apartments, 20 of which would be affordable under the standards of the Affordable Requirements Ordinance, along with well, I should say it's on land where, for those of you who are familiar with the location, the Bank of America building, I call it that, but it's where the closed Bank of America outlet was. We would also be retaining the other existing retail space with the design within reach on the corner and other retailers in it, and would retain a 158 space parking garage. The project would also include 396 bicycle parking spaces. The developer and the architects have presented a number of iterations of this project to the Department of Planning and Development and have responded to some fairly specific comments that DPD had. And I've also met with Alderman Hopkins in anticipation of this community meeting. We've come up with what we think is a design that's appropriate to its context and is in itself a beautiful building designed by BKL. And I think some of you may be familiar with some of the designs that BKL has done in Chicago and elsewhere. With that, I would just want to give Paul Apollonio from the developer an opportunity to introduce his company. Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Alderman Hopkins. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak this evening. Georgetown is a privately held, diversified real estate investment and development firm that was founded about 40 years ago and is headquartered in New York City. We've got a vertically integrated team, which is spread across 5 markets in the US, giving us a broad investment perspective. Our portfolio includes offices, multifamily, mixed-use, retail, hotels, life science. So it runs the entire gamut of real estate. And to date, we've developed and managed over 22 million square feet of real estate. As an organization, we are long-term owners with a strong focus on design, and as a result, are careful and thoughtful in how we choose to move projects forward. We've been present in the Chicago market for more than 10 years, and the majority of the portfolio is of a similar vintage. And moreover, we've continued to invest in and grow our business in the city. In the case of LPC, for which we are here this evening, we've owned this property since 2015, and over the years have studied a variety of development options. With the onset of the pandemic, we saw much havoc created in our cities, not only to the lives of the residents, but also to the businesses. And this brought about an acceleration of many underlying trends. Amongst this was the disappearance of bank branches, with the B of A space now vacant for almost 2 years. As a result, we met with a number of Chicago-based architects to identify a talented local partner to assist us with a reimagination of what in our view is an important site. So with that, I'd like to hand over to the BKL team to walk you through what I believe is a distinctive and elegant design to create a landmark building which distinguishes itself from its neighbors and responds thoughtfully to its transport node location. Thank you very much, and I'd like to hand over to Angela from the BKL team.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Alderman Hopkins, for hosting us this evening. We're very excited to show you this design that we have proposed and worked very hard on with DPD, as you have heard. I'm going to share my screen. Is everyone able to see my screen? Okay. I think most of you on the call tonight are familiar with the location of the site, but just to talk a little bit more about the importance of this site. It really is at the node of a very central, a lot of active neighborhoods kind of coming together. So, we have Old Town, then we have Wicker Park, Lincoln Park, that all kind of converge where our site is. And then as you travel south along Halsted towards the city, or Clybourn towards the city, it's just really a gateway site. And we really wanted to do something special and unique where we're really coming together at a very central point, an important site in the city. We wanted to also show you the site within the context that is there today, as well as some of the more recently approved PDs and what is coming. So we all are familiar with the Apple Store. That's kind of a good way to kind of anchor ourselves. And then from there, we do have a lot of residential development. We have New City, and then the Sono, and then the under construction Foundry. North and Vine also is a newer residential building along North Avenue. And then there are some proposed residential buildings that also are happening north of North as well. But you can just see in this perspective, what is existing, and also its proximity to downtown, and how it really is this gateway and a really exciting and landmark site for our city. One of the great things about the site is its transit-oriented nature. I don't think you could get more transit-oriented than this site. We are, very, very close to the Red Line Clybourn stop, just a quick hop over Halsted, and then also the number 8 Halsted bus is also very, very close to the site as well. So this is a very transit-oriented site. We really took that into consideration, and it's something that we love developing around our transit nodes. Just to remind everyone of what is currently on the site, we are looking at, images 1 and 2 are the most important because that's kind of the site we are focusing on replacing that, prior Bank of America building. There's a Design Within Reach and the now closed Mitchell and Gold Bob Williams home furnishing store as well. And then you can see the Apple store on the bottom right in the fourth image. This is an existing site plan of what is there today. It's important to understand the boundaries of the site because it's not a typical one block site, but it really encompasses everything that you're seeing in the red property line. So that is the existing two-story Bank of America, the existing parking garage, which is 4 stories, which we will be utilizing. So that's an important part of the project. And then the existing retail building, which we will not be talking about this evening very much. The other thing to really note is that there is an internal private drive within this site that is really important for this development and for how it's functioning in terms of traffic and access to the site. I'm going to flip the page and you won't see too much of a change because this is our proposed site plan. Now you're seeing our 37-story building proposed 1565 North Clybourn in place of the Bank of America building. You are seeing the top of the retail existing to remain. And then you can see how we have planned to use the parking garage, which I can talk through in subsequent slides, that we are not changing this internal private roadway and that we do plan on utilizing that, as you'll see in additional slides as well. And then you'll see how our majority of our frontage is along Clybourn. North is going to be a little bit cocked to the left here in this view, and then Halstead running along our site as well. So this is to give a snapshot before I go through the plans. I always like to start with the rendering so you can just get your head around what we're looking at. So this is the building that we're proposing at 37 stories at this very important intersection. We're trying to do something very slender and elegant. I'll talk more about the exterior facade design and the massing as we go along in the presentation, but just to give yourself a visual as we go through the plans to kind of think back to. And then looking at a pedestrian view as well, which is, one of the most important things about this site because it is so pedestrian oriented. This site is really special because of the activity generated from all the retail and the Apple store in the area. Additionally, I think something that this view really shows, and I want to talk a lot about, is that we are utilizing that existing parking garage to park for all the residents in the building. So therefore, we do not have a traditional podium like you often see in Chicago, where we have a large kind of podium parking structure that we have to, try to make look like it's active or screen or, screen the lighting. This building is able to come all the way down to the ground, engage the ground, keep its elegance, small floor plate the entire way down to the ground and really let it lightly touch the ground and not be sitting on top of a large podium. So that's something really unique about this site that we're really excited about the design. You can see that this is just really trying to activate that street along Clybourn and really activate the ground floor as much as possible. So again, keeping this image in mind when we look at some of the floor plans, and then I'll talk more about kind of the exterior treatment as we go along. Seeing it against its existing condition, I think is very important to see how much it is trying to improve that street frontage and really activating what's there. Currently in dilapidated and vacant Bank of America building that's not really used anymore, is not pedestrian friendly, but instead trying to replace that with really active uses, very glassy and visible, eyes on the street and activation along ground floor. We are looking at revitalizing the plaza between the retail building and our existing proposal. As you can see here, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the presentation as well. We are looking at an amenity level here, which we'll talk about on level 3, that cuts back to help the building relate to the scale of the neighborhood and of the pedestrians. So kind of bringing that scale down, activating this area of the building and allowing there some interaction between the street level and the building on the exterior. This is a view looking on Clybourn at the other side of the building, kind of the south portion. What we really want to show here is that there really is no back to this building. The site is extremely visible, as we talked about it being a gateway site. So all sides of the facade are treated very, very equally. And so we are continuing that high level of materiality all the way around the building. The podium is using a brick material to respond to the neighboring context and kind of a punched opening expression at level 2. And then it transitions into a metal panel expression that has a lot of detail and texture that relates to the overall shape of the building that's then brought into the facade design that you're seeing here with the shadow and the V form of the metal panel. And then just seeing this side by side along what is existing. Okay, to get to the ground plan, the ground floor plan and the plans of the building, just keep those images in mind as we look through this. Again, we decided to do a really unique form to the overall massing of the tower to do something really special and different and distinctive. We have formed the building to have these kind of taper away at the ends, allowing for a very elegant and tall form. The floor plan itself is very, very small for a building. It's around 9,200 square feet on a typical plan. So we don't have a lot of ground floor space. So we wanted to use that space smartly and really activate as much as we could. So you can see that we're lining Clybourn with that retail frontage as much as possible, and then having the residential lobby off of the internal plaza. We are not proposing any new curb cuts along Clybourn. We do believe this is a very transit-oriented site and that the majority of the residents will be coming off of the transit that's close by. Therefore, we prioritize pedestrian circulation, but understanding that a building of this size still needs to function with vehicular circulation as well. That existing drive is remaining and will be utilized for loading access and drop-off access. So there will be no cars and drop-off happening along Clybourn. Everything will come in off Weed and then come into the external existing drive to remain and drop off internally. We also have loading access off of that internal drive as well. And those loading trucks can access through Weed or also off of North Avenue as well. The other important thing to see on this site is how much we're doing landscape improvements. So again, we are looking to redesign the existing plaza and then also introduce greenery along that existing parking garage. Right now, there's a loading zone there, and then add greenery along Weed Street with 2 planters and inside that existing drive to remain as well. We do have some mechanical that has to go on the ground floor, but the majority of that mechanical is going higher up and facing the existing parking garage to kind of screen it from Clybourn and North Avenue. This is some of the landscape inspiration images provided by Confluence. We're looking to have a really open pedestrian and circulation friendly plaza that's going to allow for a lot of transition between the residents and the public accessing the retail, allowing areas for seating, some unique lighting maybe integrated within, and then trees kind of coming out of the street like you're seeing here on this image, utilizing bollards for safety and again, lighting those trees as well. We are proposing an outdoor amenity deck at the top of the building, in addition to the one you saw in the lower image of the renderings. So here you're seeing some indoor and outdoor amenity at level 37. So looking at some overall views, again, you're seeing that slender form, that kind of edge that's created that's very unique. And again, trying to do this unique form and gateway into the city. So this is looking on Halsted and Clybourn. You're seeing the taller portion of the building where it drops down and creates that outdoor amenity deck that you just saw on the last slide. The Apple store is to your right. And then this one is looking north, kind of north on Clybourn and Halsted. A very similar image, but that's the point here, is showing you again that there is no back to the building, that we've really thought about how it's visible from all angles and really trying to create that slender profile in this really unique form of the building. We wanted to show you the massing and the context again. We think it's important to understand what's there. One of the things I really want to point out in this slide is how small our floor plate is, which I've already previously mentioned, but the the slenderness and the proportions of the building are much more desirable than some of the very wide and kind of massive buildings that are happening around the site, which more directly impact at the pedestrian scale when you have this very large podium or these very large buildings at the pedestrian scale, where this one really lightly hits the ground because we have that existing parking garage. And then this is image looking in context with the rendering and kind of some of the renderings of the buildings surrounding it and seeing it within the city. One thing that we wanted to emphasize is on the east and west sides, there is a slot within the building that is helping break down the mass as well into these smaller elevations and proportions. And then also with the way that the building is formed and kind of these points on both the north and south, it's allowing us to kind of pull away from the existing neighbors to the south and really let the building lightly touch the ground instead of creating a wall against the south as well. And then just ending on the image again that we had touched on in the beginning, but just to further remind you of what you saw in plan, very active retail and lobby street frontage, redoing and reinvigorating that outdoor plaza with greenery, making it a very pedestrian friendly experience, keeping all of vehicular traffic within that internal drive that's coming off of Weed, allowing the building to come to the ground and be grounded with a masonry base that that responds to the existing neighborhood, and then the metal panel textured facade going up above that, getting a cutout and some outdoor activity to respond to the pedestrians as well. And then you're seeing that slender angle that's happening on both the north and the south of the building. So at this time, that's the end of the presentation, and we can go into more detailed questions.
All right, they are starting to come in. Will there be any greenery on the rooftop?
Right now, I mean, it's going to be, it will be a pool at the rooftop, and there will be kind of a lot of focus on, lounge chairs, but there will probably be some landscape elements as well. We will have to do our calculations of how much occupiable space we can have up there. So we always like to add greenery on our roof decks as much as possible.
Thank you. I don't know that it was stated anywhere in the presentation. If it was, I apologize. Units are rentals or condos?
Units are rentals.
You. This isn't actually a question that popped up in here, but if you could go into a little more detail about the existing parking garage, how many spaces are available, and what that would look like for the residential portion versus the retail portion also on the site. If you could just break down the parking in some detail.
I can do that. The total parking spaces is 158. The proposed breakdown is going to be 70 for residents, 73 for retail, and 15 for employees. And there will be, the garage will not be open to the public. I mean, the 73 for retail is obviously for that, but for that use.
What's the current use of the garage, Angela? Do you know?
Paul, Cheryl, you want to help me answer that,
Sure,
please?
sure. It's currently used for the retail. And it's also it is available as a public parking garage also.
Thank you.
So that's what I mean. It will no longer be available as the public parking garage,
It'll
but we
be for-
still will have 73
For retail
spaces
tenants. Yeah.
for the retail
It'll be
tenants.
accessory parking
Mhm.
to the
To the
retail
site.
and to the residential.
Thank you. Let's see. Here's a question about the height of the building. We have the footage.
It's 37 stories, 450 feet.
Thank you. What is the unit count and what kind of mix of unit sizes are you looking at? And then if there's any indication of pricing or at least a relative scale, luxury, non-luxury, that type of thing.
Okay. So the unit count is 396. There's going to be a mix of efficiency, studios, convertibles, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. The majority will be 1 bedroom units. The 1 bedrooms are around 670 square feet. We have a few 2 bedrooms around 1,050. And then our studios and convertibles range from 450 to 550, which is pretty standard for the market today. In terms of pricing, or, I would, it's maybe Paul.
Yeah, I think Paul Apollonio, I think at this point we haven't really determined what the pricing would be, but they will be market rate for that location.
Is this a luxury product or standard?
Luxury.
Luxury, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's see.
And Brian, just to reiterate, 79 of those units, though, will be affordable. So obviously those rents will fall within the required affordable requirements ordinance.
Yes,
Rents.
and I think I have a question somewhere here. A number of them have come in, so thank you everybody for your eager participation. What breakdown in terms of percentage of AMI are we looking at? Do we know yet?
We don't know yet. It would be a blended at or below 60% of AMI is the requirement. And so it'll depend on where that, we haven't actually determined how, but it'll be a blended at or below 60% of AMI as required by the ARO. And that'll be fully reviewed by the Department of Housing prior to approval.
And 100% on site, correct?
100% on site, all units on site.
Thank you. We have a question here about what the floor plans of the units will look like given the unusual dimensions of the building.
So yeah, we didn't include that floor plan yet in the design, but or in this package, but we are working on that, and that is something that at BKL we're very, very passionate about, is efficient and smart floor plan. And when we proposed this shape, the client actually asked the same question because it is such a unique shape for the building of this kind. So we did test lay it out, and we are confident that there's very few unique floor plans except for the corners, and they actually are just even better because of the views and the views out you get. So we're very confident in the unit planning of the building.
Thank you. There's a question here concerned about plans to the north of this building for another building, considering the shape and focus on visibility. So is there a plan to build something further to the north?
So are you meaning like within the site on the
Within
existing?
the plan development? Yes.
Right. So Paul.
No, I mean, no, there's not. The plan is to retain that design, what I keep calling the design within reach building, even though I know there are other retailers there, but that will be retained and not redeveloped.
And just to clarify from the alderman's office perspective to the person who asked that, they would obviously need to come for another plan development amendment, and that would probably be a pretty hard sell, obviously. So there are some protections against that. You don't just have to take Paul's word for it. Okay, let's see. Here's a question asking for clarification on what you mean by activate. I think that's in regard to the ground floor retail space.
I mean, I can answer that, Angela, if you want. Just, I think this image is actually a good image to refer to, the one that's on the screen now, which is that entire space on the ground floor, instead of being a parking podium with, for example, low ceilings and sort of just access into an elevator that takes you up above, this entire space, 2,500 square feet of which would be actual commercial retail space, would be more active than a traditional podium. And if you look at Clybourn, the building actually is pulled back a little bit too, in order to create much more. Anyone who's familiar with walking north on Clybourn and then taking a soft right onto Halsted knows that it feels a little tight there. BKL has designed this to provide more room for pedestrians to back it off. That was one of the comments that came from DPD in the alderman's office. And so I don't know if you can show that, Angela, or not.
Yeah, Paul or Angela, what is that setback from the property line?
Sure, let me go back to the ground floor plan and we can look at that together. But yeah, Paul, you said it correctly. It's just really trying to make this whole frontage as much as, here until we start to kink back a bit. But that whole frontage is active retail space. So there is no mechanical, there is no loading, there's no parking along North or Halsted. This is the setback here that we did set back to give more relief to the pedestrians because we know this is a very active intersection here. And then additionally, we pulled back even more to widen this plaza and give more space to residential circulation underneath the building above, which is ghosted. And then there is, this does not reflect, but the city is planning to revise North Clybourn Street. We haven't received those updates, but we are aware that they might be happening and making the sidewalk even wider as well.
And to add to that, this entire plan will have to be reviewed formally by CDOT upon our application.
All right, there's a question here about how rideshare drop-off and pickup will be handled. Will that be on the internal
Correct.
driveway?
Correct. The internal existing drive to remain, which is here.
Thank you. Just a few repeats here. Please bear with me. Okay. talk about the size of the units. This person also would like to know about public green space, public plaza.
So this is the public plaza that is existing. It's just currently just paved with a canopy structure above that doesn't really even shelter anyone. I think it's just kind of artistic. So we are planning on removing that canopy structure, and then we're doing the tree grove and the paving with uplights like the precedent imagery I showed, but this would be the public kind of plaza, and then all the greenery that you're seeing here. And again, the inspiration imagery provided by Confluence.
Thank you. Here's a question. Have you considered placing a mural on the corner of the parking garage near the small park? Also, thank you for utilizing existing parking garage and not creating new parking.
Yes, agree. We actually have really focused on the new proposal and haven't really talked about many updates to the existing garage at this time. But obviously we started with landscape and wanting to improve that for the pedestrian experience and the residents that are going to be circulating through this existing garage. So I think that there are ideas to come for the existing garage and what can happen. So murals are definitely something we love at BKL and would be open to exploring.
Does the developer have an approval and/or construction timeline in mind?
I can try to answer that. We're really at the beginning of the process. If we obtain plan development approval, we would expect a start in early 2025 with a approximately 20 to 22 month construction period. That's the current expectation.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit more about the bike parking, and will any of it be able to accommodate larger cargo bikes?
So the bike parking is going to be a 1-to-1 unit to bike parking ratio. So 396 bike parking stalls will be provided. Currently, they are planned on level 3 of the proposed tower building. And will there be any room for cargo-sized bikes? That's kind of to be determined, I guess. We haven't gotten to that level of detail yet.
What is the floor area ratio, and how is it calculated in terms of the site areas and borrowing from other parcels?
So the max, well, Polly, do you want
No,
to
you go
answer
ahead,
that?
Angela. No, go ahead.
The maximum FAR area, the maximum FAR area is 5, and we are utilizing all of that. That's across the site. So that kind of speaks to an earlier question about can there be another building built on top of the existing retail, and we have maxed out within that property line the FAR and MLA. Therefore, there isn't the opportunity to build more on that other site, unless, like Paul said, you went back and asked for more, which is not something.
And the overall, as Angela said, the overall FAR is 5.0. The property would be broken into sub areas, and it's a blended 5. And I'm not sure, Brian, I can try to answer whatever other detail you have in that question, but
sure. No, I think you guys
there's a cap of 5.0
I mean,
under the Chicago zoning ordinance too.
For those familiar with the basics of zoning, which obviously I know is not everybody on this call, but I know that the person who asked this is the entire the garage and retail building and this tower are all part of the same plan development. So that's how the floor area ratio is going to get calculated. Tim, who asked the question, I'm happy to circle up with you on that tomorrow. If you'd like to give me a call, I always enjoy our discussions, so please feel free. Let's see. There's a question here about what AMI stands for. I'm just I was about to type that answer, but why don't we?
I apologize. Let me go back to that. So the Affordable Requirements Ordinance requires that, and the reason I am not planting my feet is that you can also do a blended average to get to 60% of AMI. And
yeah, why don't you real quick, Paul? What does AMI stand for?
AMI stands for Area Median Income, and when I said at or below 60% of AMI, that means that a unit would be made available to a household with an income at or below 60% of the area median income. And then the city of Chicago annually determines the rents that can be charged. Those change, but a sort of rule of thumb is that it's approximately 30% of that median income level. So, if the area median income were $60,000, the rent that could be charged would be a third of that on an annual basis. And those standards are set in the city's Affordable Requirements Ordinance. And as I say, the city administratively determines those rents annually.
Thank you. What are plans for bird safety?
We always are using, we understand the importance of this question, and it's something that comes up on all of our projects. It's something that we're coming more and more in tune with, but this building in specific is not a very, glassy building. It's not an all glass building. It is punched opening at the big podium. And then there's a lot of metal panel on the building as well. So that deters, birds in general of not having large expanses of glass. Additionally, there will not be a lot of, there is no large podium on the base that's going to have a lot of greenery and shrubbery that's going to be encouraging birds to come. You do see a little greenery on that level 3 exterior space, but it's going to be minimal. And then, as you can see in the rendering as well, within our plaza, where there is greenery at grade, that facade is set back within an arcade. Again, that is not, that's allowing for some bird safety there, that's not right against the glass there. And, but yes, we're always looking and always aware of that question and thinking about that in our designs.
Thank you, Angela. And I'll add, Alderman Hopkins was the main sponsor of the bird friendly ordinance years ago, so important to him as well in regard to how this building is designed. So I thank the person who gave us that question. There's a little more question about the unit breakdown. I know we kind of covered it briefly. Do you guys have that nailed down, like the exact number of units of each size, or is that still in flux?
That's in flux.
That's
Angela was trying to, yeah, it's in flux.
Great. All right. This one was answered. There's a few questions here about how pedestrian-oriented development, transit-oriented development. I guess the questions are all concerning congestion, and I think it'd be good if the development team could talk a little bit about how, it's not imagined that a lot of the folks who lived in this building would have cars, and obviously there will certainly be traffic added, but to what extent that looks like compared to how a lot of developments are.
Yeah, I can try to address that, Brian. So first, it is a transit served location, to use the term in the Chicago zoning ordinance. And the city, both through its ordinance and as a matter of policy in reviewing plan developments like this, encourages as little parking as possible. And in fact, would have supported fewer spaces, I believe, and DPD and CDOT could weigh in on that, but I'm confident of that. However, I do take the question very seriously, understand the concerns about congestion, pedestrian safety, the use of cars. We have engaged KLOA, a traffic engineer, to do a formal traffic study, which is in the works. That will have to be submitted to the city. We'll get it in as soon after we file an application as we can. CDOT will do a careful review of that, and I expect that we'll get comments. But I would go on to say that the developer, Paul's company, Georgetown, will have to operate this building and will have to make it attractive to renters. And they are very confident in the parking ratio that will sufficiently serve their tenants. And they actually have to take it to market. But again, I realize that's an opinion from somebody in the industry. So I understand that would have to be substantiated with a study, and we're doing that study.
Thank you. What types of retail are you looking at for the retail space, given the amount of vacancy in the area?
Paul, I can try to answer that if you'd like, or feel free.
Sure. So in terms of the vacancy in the area, we're actually net reducing the amount of retail on the site by around 15,000 square feet. So Bank of America is about 18,000 square feet, and we're going to be creating approximately 2,500 square feet of new retail. In terms of the format for that retail, it's currently undecided, but the way the stores lay out, there's an opportunity to create 1 or 2 spaces. One of those spaces returns onto the public plaza with greenery. So we're very confident in terms of attracting retail that would potentially serve that would serve the community. Perhaps maybe some F&B, which we think could be lacking in and around this area.
And for those not in the business, Paul, can you explain
Food
what
and
F&B is?
beverage. So perhaps a coffee shop might be something interesting on the corner, particularly with the green space that we're introducing. So somewhere soft for people to land on what is generally seen as a long, hard street.
Thank you. How much property tax revenue is this new tower expected to generate?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but a lot.
A little early for that, but a lot
I
is a
can-
good start.
I do work in the industry and including in property tax work, and I'm confident that it will be a large number.
Thank you. How does the height of this building compare with other tall buildings in the area like Sono and New City?
Sure, I can answer
If
that.
you
We
could
did
pull
have a
that slide up
slide,
again.
yeah, earlier on
It's
kind
a
of
little hard
showing
to-
this.
A little hard to read on our screens here just because of the
Okay.
issue you're having with the Zoom, but there we go. That's better.
Yeah. So our building is proposed at 37 stories. The foundry, which is under construction, is that's 27. Sono West, or they just call it Sono condominiums, is 28. Sono East is 22, and I think New City is also relevant at 19. Again, I think this shows it really well. But the one thing that is significantly different between is not only the height, but the size of our floor plate. You can see that ours is a much smaller floor plate, and I actually know the approximate sizes of the others as well. So ours is around 9,200, and these other buildings are anywhere from 16,000 to 13,000 to 12,000. And again, it's a much wider floor plate, which much more impacts the pedestrian experience at grade when you're walking along a very wide floor plate tower. This is a really, in our view, great proportion and really exciting to do something very tall and slender and narrow, which lightly touches the ground and actually, is different on shadow and when you're walking along it as a pedestrian. And we also know that the city is, in a lot of their discussions and design are actually pushing for more taller and slender towers now. So we're working with them on that as well.
Thank you. Can we talk about the economics of this being a rental building versus condominium?
I can speak to that just without specific numbers because we don't know what they are. The market in Chicago right now for condominiums is extremely thin. There is, though, continued demand for rental, especially at transit-served locations. And that's what's driving the choice to do rental rather than condominium. That's what's feasible. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Brian, what the question is beyond that, but
I think the person was just curious, why apartments instead of condos, and I know that the main driver behind that is economics, and I think that answer is sufficient.
Yeah, the condominium market in Chicago is not particularly strong now.
That's a good short answer. Yeah. Okay. Question for either myself or Alderman Hopkins: does a building approval of this height set a precedent for new buildings in the area? Alderman, would you like to take first crack at that? Otherwise, I can.
Yeah, sure. The answer is no. We evaluate each project on its own merits. However, any area like this where there's a lot of interest in development, there is an overall critical mass that theoretically is attainable. How much is too much is the question. It's hard to answer that prospectively. But as far as this project is concerned, I think we actually do need to pay a little bit more attention to the traffic impact, more so than has been the subject of this call anyway. We're going to look a little bit more in depth at the KLOA study because there is a lot of interest, and we just have to be cognizant of that. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. In today's economy, what's happening in the city of Chicago right now, the fact that there is significant interest from a New York-based developer, I take that as a good sign. But that doesn't mean we should just give them carte blanche to do whatever they want, regardless of the impact that it'll have on the immediate surrounding area, which already, as we all know, has some major traffic challenges. So, so the answer is we need to evaluate each project individually on its own merits and just kind of keep in the back of our minds, that there are potential plans, nothing specific right now, but potential plans for additional residential development in the future that could continue to impact traffic.
Another question about a mural here. Have you considered doing a mural on the soffit above the third floor amenity space?
So that is something that I already mentioned that BKL is a fan of murals. If you're familiar with their work, 160 Morgan, the Dillon just opened. It has a mural on the underside there. Citizen M, we have a mural on the underside there. We love enlivening any part of our building with local artists, and yes, that could absolutely be an option.
Thank you. Just trying to answer as many of these questions as we can.
Thanks, Brian.
Is there any TIF money being used to finance this project?
No.
Thank you. Another question here about the height. I think, oh, that was covered. They said thank you. Wonderful. Let's see. Just trying to cover all the different topics. So if anybody's specific questions not getting answered, I do apologize. And obviously we'll be happy to answer those from the office in the coming days. Are you planning in-unit laundry for the apartments, or is it centralized?
In unit.
I didn't hear that, Angela.
In unit.
In-unit laundry?
Correct.
Was I heard? I'm sorry.
Correct. In unit.
It is in unit. Okay, sorry.
In unit.
I think your microphone was a little away there.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry. I was actually twisting. Okay, got
There
it.
we go. That's better.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay. Let's see. Can you talk a little bit about security measures in terms of the design of the building?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk a little bit about architecturally, and then if there's anything else to add, Paul, you feel free. But I think in terms of security, there will be a front desk that will be manned 24 hours like you see in these residential luxury buildings. So that's obviously full-time security. In addition, again, I talked about just kind of eyes on the street and the safety of that. So it goes back to the activation of the exterior and of the ground floor, making sure that everything is kind of being able to see and visible, having, you know, an expanse of visibility in and out of the building as well. Is there anything else you want to add, Paul? But
Angela, I was going to ask, will the plaza will be, that little plaza will have adequate lighting too, right? Between the,
yes, yeah,
where the entrance to the building is and as people move from the
absolutely.
building into and out of the garage.
Absolutely. Obviously, the residents need to feel safe, kind of entering in and out of their plaza and the garage where they're parking and kind of walking through the area. You know, one thing that is great about this site is the existing parking garage. Maybe as a resident, you know, normally you would park in the building and then not have to leave. But in this case, you're parking if you are driving to the site with the 70 spots we have available for residents. So not that many. You will be parking in a separate structure and then having to walk across. So that will definitely have to be well lit and made sure that the residents feel safe.
And the shoppers. So
And
yeah.
the shoppers.
Great. And will there be cameras? And if so, would building management be interested in linking them in with the Office of Emergency Management and Communications?
I think that's one we will have to just talk about. Paul, you and I haven't chatted about that at all, and I don't know that you've talked with the architects about it, but that's certainly something we can take under consideration.
All right, another question about parking here. So kind of the opposite of, I think, what a lot of these questions were getting at in terms of there not being enough parking. There's an individual who would like to know about what the parking utilization is now in that garage and if there's a possibility to reduce parking even further in order to reduce congestion and rely on the transit.
I think we do need some parking to serve the retail and the residents, so would be hesitant to lower it further. We are, as I said earlier, awaiting a traffic study that'll give us a better sense of the demand. Right now it varies, but somebody noted, I think, I'm trying to watch these questions, that it's not always full, and that's true. But again, we need to wait till we get the traffic engineer's review to know that. And I think we would not want to take down the existing parking structure. That I'm confident that Georgetown would prefer not to do that.
Will there be any dog-specific areas?
Yes, we are looking at a dog run on L3.
A dog run on the third floor amenity space. Okay, I just want to, there's still quite a few questions, but I just want to make sure that we're covering a lot of the main topics. Can you talk about the decision to not have balconies?
Yes, and are you able to hear me okay now? I just want
Yes,
to
thank
confirm.
you.
Okay, great. So there's actually a lot of developers, that's kind of a developer-based decision. And there are a lot of developers that are not pursuing balconies because they are sometimes considered junk collectors or eyesores. They're used for leasing, but then they're not necessarily used year round because of our climate, and that they just kind of go unused and end up collecting junk. So in this, we with talks and with the design of Georgetown, they felt that the design was stronger without balconies, and that then they can keep more control of the aesthetic of the building and making sure that it is well maintained.
Okay. We have a question here about disability accessibility features of the building.
All of our buildings have to be accessible for ADA guidelines so that disability will be in full compliance. We will obviously be meeting all accessibility clearances, all accessibility requirements in terms of vertical circulation. The garage will also be fully accessible and have the required ADA stalls that are required and required clearances that go along with that as well.
Yes. Alderman, probably a question for you. What are the next steps in this approval process?
Yeah, thank you. As I said, we need to take a much deeper dive into the traffic impact. So we will be doing that in conjunction with both the consultant that's been hired and our CDOT engineers who are looking at this project right now. And then continue to have some more community review. As I said at the outset, I know we've got representatives of Ranch Triangle on tonight, Sono residents and their leadership, some of the residents who are active in the How Orchard Burling neighborhood Facebook group. So really like to hear from you guys. After we get through all the chat questions tonight, if there's time, would hope that you guys can use the raise your hand feature and share some of your thoughts and your comments tonight. But if not, please contact my office in the coming days and weeks and provide your input because we really need to hear from the immediate community what their thoughts are on this project. Oh, one question that just did come up. Someone sent me a text. And by the way, for those of you who have been struggling to get the video feed, I guess there's been a few people that have audio only tonight. So if there's some technical problem, we apologize for that. But someone did ask through a text if you could address how you will prevent any of the units from being used for Airbnb purposes or other short-term rental purposes. Could you address that, please?
The city's ordinance will prevent that. So these are going to be standard dwelling units.
Yeah, not just the city's ordinance, but there's people who often try to get around that and subvert that. That has actually happened in the past. So any additional measures that management could take to make sure that people don't try to abuse that.
Yeah, and Alderman, I appreciate that, of course. And I think I can speak for Georgetown in saying that they will be managing this themselves as an apartment building. They will have to monitor, they will have to monitor efforts to sublease. If anybody were to do that, they would be violating their leases.
Okay, there's a question here about infrastructure improvements on Weed Street. I guess there are some sewers and sinkholes that need some attention. Is that something that can be addressed in this process?
I wasn't aware of that. I think we weren't aware of that. I do understand that segment of weed that extends off of Clybourn is a public right of way. We've built the building, obviously not to encroach on that right of way. And we'll again expect CDOT to look at this design, including its impact on Weed Street.
Thank you. All right. Again, folks, I apologize if I didn't get to your written question. There are quite a few here, a lot of them covering similar topics, so hopefully we hit most of those. I think at this point, given that we are approaching 7 o'clock, we'd like to take some live questions. So if you have a question that you don't think the topic was covered, and we can get some out loud conversation going here, that would be great. Please feel free to use the raise hand function.
Brian, can I add one thing?
Yeah, please.
Or could I ask Angela to address one thing? I've seen this come up in the questions, is whether there's been a study to show shadow impact. I wonder, Angela, we know that's going to be asked, so maybe could you show that?
Yes, again, we do have it in the, I mean, we have done the shadow study, and it is.
Is that okay,
really-
Brian, to do that, to
Yeah,
show that?
please.
Or we could follow up.
That's a good call. There are some questions there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think that we really, again, I know this is in regards to height. We have done some shadow studies that I have in the appendix here. I just wonder if you're going to be able to read them. So, so what we looked at in these shadow studies is on your left is without the proposed building, and on your right is with the proposed building and the impacts that they're having. One thing I want to note is that, you know, focusing on bulk and mass versus height, and also how just imagining how if this was a wider floor plate, how much more shadow would be cast on the surrounding site. So again, this floor plate is very small for a building of this size, and I think it really helps with these shadow studies. We're looking in March and September 21st. Again, on the left is as it exists today, and on the right you're seeing as it is proposed. Again, majority of the shadow is being cast over that parking garage. We also looked at it pulled back with specific focus on our neighbors to the south, knowing that those smaller scale townhomes are directly adjacent to us, that we really wanted to pull back from. And I talked this a little bit, but with the way the building kind of comes to the south to a point to minimally impact our neighbors, really pull back from the site, and additionally really studying how the building affects them in terms of shade and shadow. September 21st, since these buildings out to the south, they're not really affected at all. And then they are, as you go later in the day, they start to become slightly affected, maybe one, around 5 p.m. And then looking at June, and earlier in the day at 11 and 1 p.m., again, our shadows are only affecting retail buildings to the north, and then our adjacent parking garage. And as you go later in the day, again, minimally affecting our neighbors to the south, a bit more around 5 p.m. But again, that's later in the afternoon. And then June 21st with our proposed building, looking at a lot farther out scale. I've seen that again at 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. And then in December, obviously our kind of worst time of the year for shadows, and just kind of seeing how everything's kind of dark by 5 p.m., which we all know is true because we're sitting with it today. And then again, looking at that farther out scale so we can really understand how that's affecting our neighbors. And you can see how it's just minimally impacted because those are to the south, and then the buildings to the north are retail.
Angela, thanks for running through that. I think I can kind of see it on my screen, but if that's something, if this part of the deck is something that can be shared.
Yeah, and that's why I was like hesitant to bring it up, because it
Sure.
is
No,
something you really got to
a lot
kind
of
of
folks on the call be really interested in looking at
Okay.
this a little closer. So
Mhm.
that's
I
something that
understand.
we can certainly share, and maybe other portions of the presentation as well, given that the
Mhm.
Alderman heard there were some issues with visuals for some people. So we can talk
Yeah.
about that later. But yes, we'll do our best to get at least portions, if not all, of this presentation shared publicly. And also for those who asked if we could run through it again, this presentation, this entire meeting is being recorded, and we'll have it posted to the Alderman's website, hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday. So certainly feel free to watch it again there if you wanted to see those slides a little more closely. Okay, let's go back to the live questions. We had a hand from Molly. Molly, you should be able to speak now. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm curious. I think the building looks great, and I like that you're reusing the existing parking, but I am curious, the existing parking garage takes up substantially more of the parcel of land than the actual residential tower itself. And I heard one person, I can't remember who, sorry, say that the developer would prefer not to mess with the existing parking. I'm just curious why, considering it seems like there's really only going to be one bite at the apple for reopening the PD, and it's so much of the square footage of the land that could be used for additional development, why that's being ruled out in favor of keeping the existing parking.
Please.
Sorry, is somebody talking?
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna start. I can try to address that, and Paul, feel free to jump in and cut me out if I'm misdescribing this, but it's a fully built parking structure which has adequate parking to serve the building. I understand, to serve the uses, both the retail and the residential uses. I do understand the comment about its footprint, but we wanted to build a slender building anyway. And so I think Angela's comments about the slender nature of the building, I'm not going to say it's perfect, Molly, but it's the best solution given the site layout. That building is nowhere near the end of its useful life. It's not that old a parking structure. Beyond that, I don't know, Angela, whether there's anything else about that structure, or Paul, anything you want to add, but it's just
So the only thing I'd like to add is it comes twofold. We're very excited by creating the slender tower on the site. And I think to demolish the existing structure, to only have to rebuild the same sort of parking structure is incredibly unsustainable in terms of embodied carbon. So, we much prefer maintaining the existing structure and going ahead with a more elegant slender tower.
I'll cover what I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Katie, go ahead.
This building has 360 apartments, and there's another development going in at Wells and North Avenue, which is proposed to have 500 units. How is the traffic study for North Avenue taking into account all of these developments?
I can answer for our traffic study. I did speak to the traffic engineer about his assumptions, and it will take into account, that's the building at the Walgreens, I believe you're referring to.
Correct.
Yes, it will take into account the impact of all of those units in doing trip projections. And of course, we'll take into account the buildings that are being built to the southwest across Halsted. So our analysis that we're doing, and CDOT would require this anyway, and we'll review it on that basis, does include those new developments. And the impacts will take into account those, the projected impacts will take into account those new buildings and all of those new apartment units.
So then if we have concerns, we should address that with CDOT, because I can tell you today, I go to the airport quite frequently, and a commute from, say like LaSalle to the expressway at 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night takes over a half hour just to get to the expressway. But we can address concerns with CDOT.
Understood.
Thank you,
Fair
Katie.
comment. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for that feedback too. It's obviously, as the Alderman mentioned, something that's top of mind for everybody, himself included, is what are the traffic impacts. So we appreciate that feedback. Okay, Ethan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's my question is just really brief and kind of on a similar vein, because I'm glad you guys are talking about both things like congestion, but also things like carbon sequestration and environmental concerns. And maybe this is also something that will become more relevant during the traffic studies, but I'm a little confused because I hear people talking about bringing new residents to the area, and then talking about how we need more parking because that needs to mitigate congestion concerns. And it seems to me like the more cars you add to a development, let's say we were talking about expanding parking, that would mean more of these residents would be relying on private vehicles rather than attracting people who might not have a vehicle to begin with living in this area. So is there a correlation here between, including more or less parking, or I guess a correlation between residents who want to live car-free or without a car in the structure, and versus how that actually impacts traffic? Because I've heard both. I've heard that less parking spaces increases traffic. I've heard more parking spaces increases traffic. And I'm really not sure how that would play into how this development, factors into what's going on. And so let's say traffic on North Avenue.
I will respond not as a traffic engineer, but as someone who works with and has hired the traffic engineer for this project, is that Ethan, the question you asked is exactly the analysis that he will do, which is what is the likely actual demand for parking spaces that would result from these additional units? And also, what is the ratio? That is, what number, and it's part of the same answer. That is, what number of the unit owners will want parking, and will the number of parking spaces, well, frankly, that's more of a market decision for Paul and his colleagues, which is that they wouldn't build a building that they thought could not be filled with tenants without parking spaces. So
Right.
they're very comfortable with that ratio from a marketing standpoint. I think it's hotly debated what the actual ratios are, but they are much, much lower than 1-to-1, which is why the city's law and policies have changed to encourage fewer spaces. And actually at locations like this one, immediately adjacent or almost on top of, in this case, a transit stop, the city's standard allows 0 parking. And that's based on the city's own traffic engineering.
Right. I absolutely agree with that sentiment. I think, if you're talking about traffic congestion and you are building new housing, right, it would make sense to build new housing that doesn't include vehicle spaces to discourage residents from bringing more private vehicles to the area. And that was my assumption. I just wanted to sort of ask how that's being factored into this development, but thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay, I don't see any more hands, so we'll I think we can go ahead and bring this meeting to a conclusion for the evening. Obviously, if there are specific questions you did not get answered and you want to reach out to our office, if we don't know the answer, we'll get that answer from the development team. So I'm gonna feel free to do so. My name is Brian Pellrine. I'm Director of Development for Alderman Hopkins, and I will be in the office all week. So please feel free to give me a call. With that, I say let's get some concluding remarks. First, Paul, from you, and then from Alderman Hopkins.
I would just reiterate what you just said, Brian. We welcome comments about the development. As I said, we will be providing a traffic study that will be vetted carefully by CDOT. Look forward to doing that. We appreciate Alderman Hopkins and you making the time and facilitating this meeting, and hope that people think as we do that this is a wonderful project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Excellent questions tonight. This was a very good and productive meeting. There's more work to be done. As I said at the outset, this may or may not be the only community meeting we hold on this. At this point, I think it's more likely than not we'll need one more, just to get into depth a little bit more with both the parking and traffic impact. I'll just give you my initial reaction. What I like most about this is the fact that it is not plopped on top of a podium. I happen to be from a neighborhood originally, Streeterville, which, I watched its evolution for 20 years, one high rise plopped on top of a podium after another. It's bad architecture. It's bad urban design. It doesn't look good. And I'm so glad that we're hopefully migrating away from that now. So that's what I like about it. What I don't like is, again, what was just mentioned by the final questioner. We just haven't fully addressed, both the parking and the traffic impact, how it fits in just to this project, but also to the context of what may be built in this area in the future. And it's, well, first of all, it's ironic that I happen to be talking to you while I'm in my car, so I have to cop to that. But I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, and I'm old enough to remember what the area of North Clybourn and Halsted looked like years ago before it became, basically the Schaumburg of the North Side. And I will just tell you, based on my personal beliefs, my biases, and my almost 10 years of work now as an alderman, and before that, 15 years leading a community organization that was very involved in zoning decisions. If you came to me today with the plan for the retail conglomerate and the traffic design that exists around North and Clybourn now, I never would have supported it. In fact, I would have vehemently opposed it, knowing what we know now and knowing that the market is choosing to look for a new urban lifestyle that is not car centric. And as Paul mentioned, the ratio his decline based on real market conditions. These are people who are choosing to live in a high-rise community and not own a car at rates that were unheard of 25 years ago. We need to lean into that. We need to encourage that, and developments like this need to address that directly, how they foster that and continue going in that direction and not backwards. So there's an answer to that question. We're not quite there yet. But I think as we engage the CDOT team and the private consultant on this, we'll have some of those answers for you, hopefully at our next community meeting. So again, thank you, everyone. And I look forward to hearing your feedback. Have a good night.